Go ahead and resume our work session at 12:27 p.m., continuing our conversation around school planning update, 5-year work plan draft.
Okay, good afternoon this time, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Mr. Pino, Mr. Powers, and Dr. Golick, good to see you all this afternoon. There is one item before we launch straight into the 5-year district facilities work program, and that's an update on the Reddick, the old Reddick school, I believe also on the list. You may recall last month we brought figures to the board, just under $500,000 worth of demolition costs, almost half of that remediation of environmental concerns at that facility. That item is actually on the July 27th board meeting for recommendation for approval. Now, as far as the concern with funding, which really extends past the facilities department's immediate obligation, what we've uncovered in talking with the federal grants and programs folks is that there is no specific grant out there as far as demolishing a building. Most of the grants, if not all of them, are geared towards some form of refurbishing for a particular use or constructing something from scratch. So it looks at, certainly at this point, that if the building were to be taken down and done away with, it would be something on the school board's nickel rather than any sort of assistance from an outside entity. Most of the conversations I've had centered around with our folks in federal grants and programs, other government entities, more or less looking towards what happens after the building is gone. So obviously if we do move forward, it's already on the board agenda. If we do not, we obviously can take that item off or let the board vote it down. But we don't see the price getting any better simply because as the conditions continue to deteriorate, it's certainly going to exacerbate the efforts to try to remove any sort of hazardous materials before the building is demolished. And so that's the quick update for you.
This
Sure.
jogged my memory. What was the reason why they couldn't just burn it?
Because of the amount of asbestos and other things in there, if it becomes airborne,
Gotcha, okay.
it's not controlled anymore if in the form of a vapor, and it becomes a problem for the fire services.
A lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but every year it's more and more money, as Mr. Knight knows. I think I'm curious, like the very first time, what it was then to now. I know you probably don't know the number, but
Probably don't want to know that.
yeah, and I was like, yeah, and I think I remember some other numbers too, but I don't recall exactly. But I do know that when you sit on things and keep waiting, the cost does increase. But if somebody, it's a hazard for a few different reasons. You know, the materials in it are hazardous, but when it just sits there and, you know, people enter it and somebody gets injured, then you're going to be paying, unfortunately, for that. So I know it's difficult, but it does need to be taken down.
It's a terrible eyesore. I feel bad for the town of Reddick that it has sat there, you know, this long, looking that bad, but there were a lot of different options that boards prior to us were looking at, and of course, you know, we had very lean years where there was hardly the money to keep the lights on in our schools. So, you know, it's come to this. There was a lot of interest in the community about the bricks. So if that could still be in play and if they're not contaminated or whatever, to put those off to the side and look at doing some sort of a fundraiser with them, or using them maybe to whatever, if we decide to rebuild something or the county wants to do something out there. It would be nice to have some remnants of the memories of that building, is what I heard a lot of feedback on, which I didn't necessarily expect, but there's definitely memories of that school that are still very much alive, and a lot of and quite a few of our community members up that way. So if that's a possibility to keep in mind, who knows? Any ideas what that land would have to be worth something as development continues, and it's right on the main road. You know, going forward, that'll be a conversation for another day. I guess we just have to take it down first, right? And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Consensus.
Yeah, we're looking for if we want to proceed taking it down or not, then we'll make it happen, and then obviously there's time for the board to decide what, if anything, to do with that property
cost
once the
again?
building's gone. $499,780 and probably some change, so
500,000.
500,000,
We can round that one up.
I think so.
No deductive change orders? You know,
Probably in a case of a demolition, usually not. The contingencies we put in there are for unforeseen, and in this case, there won't be much unforeseen because we're taking the whole thing down, so.
Right.
And I'm assuming this is gonna have to, Ms. Boston Ellis, general fund?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
To Ms. Thrower's point about fundraising, I don't know what that looks like, where that goes. I love the concept, and I think that's something we do need to explore with these bricks, if that's a potential.
Yeah, people
Just-
said they'd be willing to
I
pay.
don't know that it would, I'm not sure how that works, because it's not going to necessarily offset costs
No.
of demolition.
No.
Is it a fundraiser for potential new construction? Is it a fundraiser that just goes into the public education fund? So I'm interested in exploring that. I just don't know what that looks like. So I don't know what the answer is on that.
Maybe it could go to Reddick, the school. And I wonder if they could take the initiative on that somehow a little bit. Like the school itself, like a community and involved.
You may have the entire north side that may be interested as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's what
Anybody
I'm
who went there
thinking.
might have
Yeah.
interest.
Because,
A lot of alumni.
1957, that was the original North Marion High School.
Yeah.
It was.
Relocated.
So would there be some, one, let me ask, we don't know if those bricks would be contaminated, number one.
Right. Being on the outside, there is a decent chance they are not. The hard part about the bricks is when they go to demolish, they're not taking down brick by brick.
Right,
And to clean the mortar off, it's a cost.
right. That's
So
what-
probably what would happen is a good majority of them would not survive the demolition. And if we were to try to get it to where it was surgically removed, the cost would increase exponentially. So probably the best chance would be anything unbroken. There will be mortar stuck to it. A lot of them are probably already cracked because there is some foundation damage to that facility as well. And obviously those would be useless. I would say that they would probably be better used as some sort of sidewalk or paving material, even though they're not a paver brick. Because code-wise, for us to reuse something that old, it would have to be some proof that this meets current standards. And back in the 20s, there was no stamp of standard per se on the bricks to say what they're made of or what their content is. So they would be used as some sort of dressing, not anything structural.
Right, for like a memorial, not a memorial, for,
Pedestal,
Right.
something along
Right.
those lines.
Like the sidewalk in front of Ivy House.
Yes, something like that.
That's what I was going to say.
Bricks.
You could use the bricks for a memorial to the site, and then strategically locate that based on what you're going to do with the site to honor those former students and staff.
Or put it at the existing school with a plaque. So like you see sometimes on a trail, this was a trail Ponce de Leon took or what have you, and this was where the site of the old Reddick School, which was originally School XYZ. That might be the best use. of those
Even if
sorts
you
of
could
things.
save one brick, you could encase the brick as this brick signifies the marker.
there's a cornerstone there, it has to be in that building, right?
I think there'd be a cornerstone, yeah.
Probably so covered in mold, it's easy to pass by, but yeah, there normally would be a cornerstone in a building at that age. And we could
We
save that. Yeah, we'll put in for it to make sure it gets preserved.
And you never know what you're gonna find till you start, the project. So maybe the demo folks could be notified that it does have historical significance to a number of people in the community and, within reason, we'd like to save some of that stuff. And then safeguard it somehow, because once those bricks are in a pile, you know who's gonna be going in there to get themselves a brick. So we need to think about that too.
Okay, well, that was the update. I appreciate the feedback on that.
Okay.
And so we'll now turn our attention to the 5-year district facilities work program and have a PowerPoint here for you. So we'll start off with some background information, just a couple of housekeeping items. The Florida statutes and SREF both speak to 5-year work programs, and they happen every year. Even though they're a 5-year plan, every June 30th, 1 year sunsets and another one comes up on the horizon. They are direct derivatives of the 5-year school plant survey. The board may recall about a month ago, the board approved the 5-year school plant survey. The state, by the way, has already reviewed and approved it. So it was lightning fast. I think it's because we spent so much time asking them questions about it. The submission is due October 1st of each year. Unfortunately, the last 3 years running, the state's forms have not come out for us to fill out, all 25 pages of them, until after October 1st. So most likely we will get a waiver from the state. That's what's been happening previous years. So it'll be something that's voted on most likely after October 1st rather than before. And we have a couple of major funding sources. PICO, or Public Education Capital Outlay Construction and Maintenance money, comes from the state. Capital Outlay and Debt Service bonds, that are referred to as CO and DS funds or bonds, also come from the state. And we have our large portion of it is property millage, which is property taxes here in Marion County. And then finally, any referendums or board authorized sources such as impact fees or sales taxes also would go towards funding the capital program.
Are PICO funds really sources of money? Because I don't see any numbers.
They are a source of money in paper, but the reality is, and I'll show you on this very same slide, that you see it's dashed all the way across. We haven't received PICO construction money, I think 14 straight years now, and we're not projected for the next 5. And we haven't received any PICO maintenance funds in 5 years in a row, and are not projected to receive any for the next 5. So in the statutes, it says that that is a funding source. The reality is we haven't gotten any funding in almost a decade and a half.
Is any district receiving PICO funds, or just us?
Charter schools now, right?
Charter schools are getting the majority of PICO funds.
Well, it looks like they're getting all of them because I see dashes,
All of
no dollars.
Hearing behind me, all of them. So, yes, it's funds, but not to us or many of our colleagues.
It's a funding source, but we don't get it.
Well, and it's
Right.
not a significant funding source. I mean, charter schools do get all of them, yes, but it's off of the wired telephones in your homes is where
Yeah.
that.
Landlines.
Landlines. And so there's the reduction of those every day.
Yep, that's another conversation for sure. Yep. All right. Well, I just kind of wanted to point that out because if we're looking at sources of revenue and there's no money there, then the public needs to be aware of that. So
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, sure. So we start off in terms of funding sources with a rollover balance. Any projects not completed before June 30th, the funding and the expenditures are rolled into the upcoming year. So we have about $33,077,033 worth of rolled over funds from previous years, and they're both restricted and unrestricted. The other breakdown from state sources, really the only fund to speak about, is the capital outlay and debt service money, and that amounts to $1,330,260. And then by far our local revenue sources, which is millage, expected to increase in 2% increments each year, is our by far largest amount of funds. So when you add that $35,454,539 figure to the state's funds, we have a total initial revenue of $36,784,799. Before we can actually use those funds, however, we have expenditures that come off the top, such as buses, vehicles, disbursement to maintenance to offset general fund sources. Our property insurance is paid for out of capital expenditures, as well as our transfer to debt service to pay previous borrowed amounts. That is just over $22 million worth of expenses that comes off that figure on the other page. And so the breakdown is, once you add what's left of millage, the state sources, and our unrestricted and restricted fund balances, this year we have $43,330,944 to work with. And it's by far the largest amount of the 5 years because of the rollover figures. The other years don't have a rollover figure because they have not happened yet. And so anything we don't finish this year will roll to the next year, and so on and so forth. So now we get into the actual projects, and we've broken this down into 3 major categories, and then we have some color coding for you. So we have maintenance and repairs, which is basically replacing large equipment such as air conditioning, replacing roofs. It's anything being replaced or refurbished. The other categories are capital outlay student stations, which would be schools, classroom wings, anything where kids congregate for education. And then finally, capital outlay non-student stations, which would be renovations, major remodeling of an entire school, or such facilities as cafeterias or art and music suites, things that don't collect classroom seats on a regular basis and don't have fish charged to them. So the color coding works like this. Anything that's in green is funded, and we've put all the funding up in the first couple of pages. Anything not funded is in a peach color, and to the far right you see yes, 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 or no, no, no. And then the schools highlighted in the dark blue represent all those projects that are in the 5-year survey that we just got approved by the state. So I'm not going to go down every line item. I'll just hit some of the generic topics. Most of the items that we have are air conditioning related and roof related as far as funding. And as we run through these projects and run through these lists, there's a couple of sheets of this. The largest projects that stand out currently in play are air conditioning work at Dunellen High School. We have some work at Bellevue Santos Elementary. We're anticipating doing work at Howard Middle School this year as well. And there are roofs at Hillcrest School and Westport High School that we expect to do this year. There is also funding still sitting in the MTI projects that are there pending the outcome of future decisions on what happens with those facilities. So as we kind of wind up the funded piece, you see that, again, especially not only this year, but in the future years, they're all air conditioning or roofing related. And there's a few that are out there that are related to electrical systems. 9 times out of 10, they're also tied directly into the air conditioning, because without upgraded electric, you can't turn the new air on. So now we go to the unfunded, and it's much the same. Most of the projects that are unfunded are air conditioning and roofing related as well. So the reason why we have a mixed bag is we go based on the historical, the history of the schools and what their needs are in priority, what's failing first basically, as well as what are our maintenance folks having the most trouble with. It could be situations where, well, the electric's running, but it's 50 years old and we can't get parts for it anymore. So that becomes a priority simply because if it goes down, we're down indefinitely. And so as you march through the unfunded projects, you see most of the same situations, air conditioning and roofing related projects. Then we turn our attention to the overall totals of the maintenance work. And you can see that our funded and unfunded combined is worth $37,573,611. Our funded portion this year alone is just over $28 million. The unfunded is just over $9 million. And so if you look at the entire 5 years worth of maintenance projects, it's valued at over $131 million. $83 million, of course, is what is funded. $48 million, which is not, or 63% of our maintenance projects in the next 5 years come up funded. 37% are projected not to be funded. So then we'll turn our attention to the capital projects. Student stations, there are only 2 of them. One is the replacement school for Lakeware Middle School, and the other is Ocala Springs, a new 8 classroom addition out there. Neither one of those projects are funded, and combined they're over $63 million worth of work just within those 2. So that leaves us with the final category, which is other projects, non-student stations. And again, these are projects such as major renovations of an entire school, of which the air conditioning piece has been carved out of it and placed in the maintenance projects. So if we know we can't do a $30 million renovation and we know the air is bad and everything else is getting by, we'll try to carve that air conditioning replacement portion out, seek to get it funded, put it under maintenance, and that leaves the balance of the renovations of the schools to be funded at a later date. And and they're all over the map. Some of them are small projects such as covered dining areas or covered PE facilities. Some are much larger, such as complete school renovations. The highlights of these couple of pages are North Marion High School's cafeteria, which is still ongoing and bleeding over into this year, and also Osceola Middle School's cafeteria on the very next page, which is also in play and completing in this fiscal year. The future projects for future years are simply projects we anticipate or hope to fund based on today's numbers. Obviously, every year we have to revise those numbers based on market conditions at that time. Now, the non-student unfunded, and unfortunately there's a few more sheets of these projects. Most of them are full-blown renovations. Some of them are additions, which could be art or music suites. Some of them are cafeteria additions, but by and large, most of them have to do with some form of remodeling or renovating of the schools. And once we pass through those sheets, and obviously stop me if you want to talk about anything in particular, but we pass through those sheets, there is a summary of all these non-student station projects, and it amounts to $81,162,787 worth of projects funded and unfunded. Overall in the 5-year plan, it's over $514 million worth of work. This year alone, we're funding just over $15 million of it, leaving $66 million in this year alone unfunded. And the numbers increase quite a bit as you go through the 5 years. So you look at the entire 5-year work program for non-student station projects, and we're only funding $48 million of it, or 9%. So of course, what does that mean when you combine maintenance and non-student station projects? The summary is the entire work program is worth $645,689,401, and that's all capital projects. If you look at what we're funding over those 5 years, we're funding $131 million worth, or only 20% of the entire 5-year work program's value, leaving 80% of the 5-year work program unfunded. Just as a footnote, we've been asked about athletic projects in particular. There are 3 scattered throughout the 5-year work program. Both Westport High School and Forest High School have a track project. None of those are in this year's project, in this year's list rather. And also North Marion High School is slated in the future to get a new gymnasium floor. We can't sand, or the custodial folks can't sand or prep that floor anymore. It has to be replaced. So to kind of put this in a graphic form, if you look at this pie chart, the light green color and the dark green color are the examples, or the representations of what is funded. And you got 11% of our maintenance projects over the next 5 years funded, 9% of our other capital outlay, or 20% of the overall plan, and 9% of our maintenance projects not funded in that entire 5-year amount. And our capital outlay not funded is 71%, or $514,537,952. And that's where your 80% comes from. So, in conclusion, every penny that we've got is utilized somewhere in this 5-year work program. There's nothing loose change hanging around in any year, including this year. We've got it budgeted for everything we think we can possibly do. Again, the work program funded amount equals about 20% of the overall 5-year work program. Our primary funding is coming from local property taxes, and we expect a 2% growth in those property taxes each year. And there's also currently no referendums in place for any sort of project funding. And again, a footnote regarding athletic facilities, there are 3 projects in there related to athletics that are funded. Question mark would be, is there anything else anticipated or desired? If so, it's not in this current 5-year plan. So with that, that's what we've got in terms of a presentation. I will be happy to answer any questions. Another housekeeping note, I will be back next month to briefly go over a recap of this. The focus next month is going to be mostly on student stations and student populations 5 years out, and where those folks might be or not be. But as far as the funding and the projects, that's what we have for you today. And again, happy to answer any questions if you've got any.
I do have a question, and this is in regards to Oakcrest, knowing that originally it was part of the plan when Oakcrest was remodeled to have if not a gym, a covered area for the kids to be able to do PE. And back in March, I was just looking through my notes, and it had as unfunded a covered play area for Oakcrest, and I think it was where did it go? $250,000. Yeah, here it is. And then on this one, I was noticing on slide 15, where it says Oakcrest Elementary, it's the covered play area is lumped into constructing, I guess, a music building, which I think was also on the original plan. So now we're looking at, $2,700,000 and change. What can we do? This is, in my opinion, we know exercise is really important for kids. We know that our newer schools all have the covered play areas so PE can continue. We know that exercise is really important. We also know that right now the kids are being stuffed into a portable on rain days, so it's not optimal, whatsoever. And it does look, when I look through the numbers, that I guess to have a play area these days, you have to spend $250,000, which just seems incredible. But I guess you have ADA requirements and every other requirement under the sun. I get that. I just love everybody's thoughts on this. I do feel like the north side and, older buildings, different population, whatever, they need support. If we're going to keep that school open, and it is such a historical school, I don't think that the community anytime soon wants to see that school shut down. So I'd like to bring a little focus to this.
Okay. Well, as far as commentary on what could be done as an alternative, the price you see on slide 15 represents the plans that were done some years ago when that phasing was done. And what those plans included was a brick and mortar music building that included restrooms, PE storage, and a large steel structure that represented a covered area. It's basically a covered basketball court. Now, I know some schools have recently put up for minimal amounts covered areas, but they're not really a play area. They're more or less an area to get kids out of the sun while they're waiting their turn to play, but we don't have any $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 covered play areas except for standing still, bouncing a ball. So if we're looking at doing an entire court, the cheapest way to do it is simply to put 4 legs and a roof and skip bathrooms, skip storage, and skip some of these other things that we've done at the newer schools. Now, of course, the schools would most likely crow about that a bit, that, well, now we've got to lose time with the students going to the restroom. It's certainly not up to me to decide who goes to the restroom before they start PE and taking them after, but we could certainly look at breaking those numbers out. Now, it is projected 3 years out, so obviously at the board's will, we can adjust projects as desired, and obviously anything that's not in play right now, which would be the entire 5-year work program except rolled over projects, is fair game for funding or not funding if it's not currently funded or currently is funded and desires not to be. So certainly I'd be happy to take a look, as well as my staff, on any of these projects as the board desires.
So, Ms. Thrower, if you look on page 12, you'll see that in the funded, we have Fezzen funded for a construction-covered play area.
Yes, I saw that.
And that is a cost. Now, every play area would be different, so you're looking at roughly $350,000. Basically, what you'd have to do to specifically answer your question, if you want to consider Oakcrest, then we need to find out what are we now not going to fund on those, on page 12 and page 13. And would be a decision of the board as well. These are the recommendations, and Dr. N.H. Jones on page 14, and also Anthony moved to on the unfunded as well with Oakcrest, just as a note.
Well, and every school is important, Fessenden included, and if they have been operating all this time without a gym or a covered area, then obviously they're as much of a priority as Oakcrest. I do know that it was funded at one time and then defunded, and then it just sort of gathered dust. And at my visits out there, I've seen it with my own eyes, and if we're trying to get kids outside and we're trying to promote fitness and we're also trying to squeeze money out of turnips. So, but, bringing awareness then sometimes brings ideas. So just bring it forward to the rest of the board.
I'm going to agree with you on maybe prioritization. So I have lots of thoughts just kind of looking through all of this again, but I'm going to follow up on Ms. Thrower's point. And if we're looking at pages 12 and 13, So the example I'm looking at is Anthony Elementary's construction of new art, music, ESE, etc. On this 5-year work plan, that is slated for 2024, 2025. However, if we go to the next page, we'll see the Osceola Middle School is slated for the same type of building, but constructed much sooner. And with Osceola receiving a new building on campus right now with their new cafeteria, granted these are not interchangeable buildings, however, the north side, again, perhaps is being, I'm not going to say pushed off, but Osceola is getting a new project right now. And Osceola is in my district, that's where my son goes to school. But to think that they might be getting a new building ahead of Anthony that's also slated to get it, those are things that just cause me question, I guess you could say, even if they are both in the 5-year work plan. I think those potentially could be reversed. Because I also saw one for 8th Street that's an unfunded one that's also being requested. So, I mean, I think if there was one ever constructed on Osceola 8th Street, it might be something they could share. Just thinking out loud on that. I also see a lot of things in here for MTI that we have, 4.5 million, I believe, on slide 6. That is funded that we have in there for MTI and HVAC upgrades and plumbing system and fire alarm system. And I'm assuming that as long as we have students there, we're going to absolutely have to make those changes, or is that something that we don't have to? Again, we're continuing to throw money into a campus that we're eventually not going to have. I believe that. This board member believes we're not always going to have that property, at least the way we're using it right now, and to continue to throw money into something to the tune of 4.5 million that potentially could be used elsewhere. I want to throw that out there. I additionally want to state that I'm grateful that we're starting to put some attention, or at least for us to start looking at what the upgrades to our athletic facilities look like, because here's going to be a statement that when I think about, and you guys know how passionate I am about athletics. First of all, I grew up in Southeast Tennessee. You all know that. Frankly, the fact that our football stadiums don't have away locker rooms or field houses is fascinating to me. That is just an anomaly where I'm from. I'm of the mindset that if you treat a student well when they're visiting on your campus, then perhaps now that FHSAA has allowed students to have the power in where they want to go to school on a regular basis, if you're treating them well when they're on your campus, they may try to look to you in the future. But I also want to say that a lot of these dollars come funded because we have student stations and student money that's associated with some of this, and I know all the money is kind of different, but and one of the things that I understand is that we haven't spent a lot of money towards athletic facility upgrades in the past because a lot of them are more self-funded programs, and students, often student station, those dollars, FTEs, et cetera, aren't necessarily associated with those. However, for any student that chooses to leave our district or chooses to leave a school because of athletic facilities, I mean, if you guys haven't been paying attention to what the villages are building in Sumter County right now, that's a good example. What's been happening just down the road in a private school right here in town. So if students are choosing to go elsewhere because of facilities, then we're losing those FTE dollars. So while we, at least in my observation and opinion, have not necessarily focused on athletic facilities in this overall, and we continue to do, a basketball court every other year, or, maybe every year, or, just a couple of things, and rubberized tracks, that's terrific, that's going to be on this work plan. But this is, not something that we're showing priority to. And I do think that athletics help build culture in schools, and it helps build vitality in schools, and helps build interest in why students continue to stay in school. So those are all my thoughts on that. I don't know what you guys think.
A lot of thoughts.
I mean,
What did you say, Board Member Cummings?
a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts.
Well, and all points well taken, yeah. And everything on here, it could be certainly justified and prioritized accordingly. But when we circle back around to, what's best for kids, what's best for kids is to be outdoors, to get exercise, to maybe even have it extend into the community as a place for them to be able to gather at basketball games, keep it vibrant. And thank you, Board Member Campbell, for pointing out what was obvious, on paper in terms of there does appear to be a bit of a prioritization staggering, going on, and I'm sure it was based on need. But if we can just take another look, if it's the board is in agreement, I think that every school needs to have a safe, covered area. And if we can't afford to build a gym with air conditioning, then certainly we should be able to afford to build something. And athletics is a whole nother story, because you've got a great point. There's a lot of competition for those dollars, and there's a lot of competition
It's only
for those
getting
kids.
worse. And so if we don't start thinking that way, those FTE dollars, we're going to lose them. And that funds everything we do, frankly. As long as the FHSAA continues to allow the students to have full authority of where they want to go and when they want to move.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is right now. And they can pick up and move in the middle of the year if they want. And it all is geared around athletics.
All right. Well, Kelly?
Right. Well, when I think of athletics, I see 9th through 12th grade, right? But I see all schools, and I think about the prioritizing. And I actually, before anything was said, I had circled something else, and I was like, I wonder how they come up with those dates. But then I flip into something else with the East Marion Elementary.
15?
It says the renovate. Is that like the carpet? What's going to happen to that school? Because that school is going to turn 100 years old, and I don't know if you've seen that carpet in a 100-year school lately. But when I think about prioritizing, I feel because that school's out, it's far, it's not right underneath us, and I imagine, I'm not sure if any of the board members have been through there recently just to take a peek. But is that the carpet or
You're talking about East Marion
East Marion?
Slide 15?
permanent classroom
15,
wall
and it says
installation?
says renovate the
Renovate
school.
school on slide 15, that's unfunded right now, 7.2 million.
Yeah, that's everything. Renovate school is air conditioning, lights, carpet, painting, door locks, security, technology. It's the entire gamut in the survey. Now, what we do, like I was noting earlier, is we carve out what the worst situations at the schools are that are the highest priority. Carpeting is not typically done, I shouldn't say it's not done in renovation. It doesn't get done in renovation because we have so few renovations that we actually do. So what happens is the carpeting tends to show up in the maintenance section under district-wide carpeting. And they go by a priority list, and that's outside my immediate realm of responsibility, but they go by a priority list of schools, and they do 1 to 2, maybe as many as 3 per year. And so I'm not sure particularly where East Marion is on the pecking order as far as carpeting. But unless we hear that they have a particular priority this year to include East Marion, then we will go ahead and factor in it's carpet, it's everything in renovation. And that's where we have to carve off pieces of it and try to do pieces and parts of a renovation because we simply don't have the funds to do the full-blown renovations.
Okay, so I'm curious, and maybe later, but the maintenance, I would like to see that. I want to see that prioritizing, and I want to see what's being done this year. And I would personally like to take a visit and visit those schools to see what is ahead of East Marion Elementary carpet. Thanks.
If I may, Ms. Dobbins, could you provide an update at some point then to the board about that, right? For the carpets and the replacement and the plans to review those, because I know we've talked about this and have seen those carpets, and we have some carpets that are in very poor shape in some of our schools, including East Marion.
Yes, noted. I will I'll find that prioritized list and take a look and distribute it out
I'm just curious.
as well, and maintenance.
Thank you.
Capital maintenance. There's so much, and I don't envy your position because there's obviously way more need than there is money. So we just have to be as open as possible of what we see, what's being shared with us, and then do our best to prioritize.
May I also ask, since I wasn't here during the last work session, about the central warehouse construction? So I know that it's in here. Has there been any conversation at all about us leasing existing space from somebody else, so we're not actually going into new construction that to the tune of 2.1 million? I don't know. I don't know. That thought had been presented to me recently, and I just didn't know if we had looked at that or if the cost would be different than us actually constructing something brand new and taking another piece of land and turning it into something whenever there's probably already existing spaces that could be converted into a warehouse or something like that, as opposed to building something brand new.
We settled on the Phoenix Center property, right?
Yes, we, to take you back 3.5 years ago or so, when we first started looking for property, there was quite a few empty facilities, some even worse than the shape of our own warehouse. The problem was they were in the shores, they were way south of Marion County, they were way north of, they were off the beaten path, and the board at the time didn't want to go put our warehouse facilities way out in the boonies and have additional expense getting to and from and getting to our schools. So the hope was to try to stay more centralized. We actually do, and again, this is not part of my immediate realm of responsibility, we actually do rent space right now because the current warehouse doesn't have sufficient space to house furniture and goods and what have you for the school district. But I don't recall any particular push to rent the entire district's needs worth of warehouse capabilities anywhere. It was get away from trying to rent from other people because that's just the flavor that was at the time.
Sure.
Get away from that because it's our stuff and we're never not going to need a warehouse.
Right, and a warehouse could be sold, too, out from under us. I know that would be in the contract, but you raise an interesting,
Just the cost differential.
Twist,
I'm just
yeah.
curious to know what if we're talking about a $2.1 million facility. If it costs $40,000 a year to rent, I don't know what it would cost. Just exploring that as, and then if we needed, the building got sold out from under us, then we would go find another warehouse space that, just like everybody else does when,
and move everything, and, there's, yeah.
I mean, there's cost to that
Logistical issues.
too.
Well, it didn't
But-
get sold in the middle of a school year and you didn't have to.
Sure. I mean, 2.1 million is a lot of money for a new construction for something that's just a warehouse.
I like the idea that
offense
we're
to our
using
warehouse
land
folks.
that we already own. I think that is a smart call, and, it might be interesting to, okay, so the other side of I-75, they're building that spec warehouse. That might not be a very time-consuming phone call to say, hey, how much would you charge us for whatever
this amount.
number of square feet we need, just for comparison's sake, to follow through on what you're saying. I think that might be worth it and fiscally responsible. Warehouses seem to be the thing in Marion County right now, so why not?
I asked Robert to recently, as I transitioned into my new position, to look at also what it would be to renovate the warehouse versus building a new renovation, and so that's on his to-do list. But everything is a chain reaction. We also have offices in that warehouse that some of them belong to our academic services side. Our assessment is over there, so eventually we're going to have to come back around to the discussion of the district office and MTI and so forth.
Yep.
100%.
How does that come back to us?
The MTI, MTC district office.
Probably, well, I need probably a good 2 weeks to finish some of the stuff we're working on because we've got a multitude of
I gave him a long list.
varieties. And they're
Was
not
appraisal on
quick.
it?
Yeah, that's in the works, and there's not a quick arriving at decision if we want a decent attempt at cost. So I would say that it would have to come back to the board, given the process of getting to the board agenda. I would need 2 weeks for our work and then the review process to get to the board agenda, whether that's 2 or 3
So
weeks.
does that time clock start today, or has it already started?
We've started it. And so, but I think there's about 5 different varieties of things we're looking at, and they're fairly different.
So September reasonable.
Yeah, I would say September.
So if we want to
sometime
set it in September, we can. I've asked Robert to look at multiple options for the district redesign. I know there's been conversations about adding to this area, looking at different options for Phoenix Center, looking at different options for the warehouse, and we can bring those back if you're ready for it in September and bring it all together, because you kind of have to look at the whole thing to make the sound decision.
Right, well, it looks like September 23rd, construction projects update with our night is already down here as a topic. So is that what we're looking at? September 23rd? Okay, all right, great. Well, that'll be an exciting conversation.
Okay.
And back to what Ms. Thrower was saying, though, I too would be in favor of us ensuring that all of our students have some kind of covered area, whatever that looks like. If it's, they may be varying costs depending on where they're going to go and the size they might need to be. But that's incredibly important, especially this year, as we just had conversation about
Ventilation.
students being able to be outside as much as possible. Covered play areas are incredibly impactful for students and in the heat and the sun and the elements. So there are some on this list that look like they're funded, but some that are not, or some that are prioritized at different times. And
What I'd like to do is look at the schools that do not have a gym or inside multi-purpose room, and then do they have a covered play area outside, and prioritize that list, and we'll bring that back to you.
okay,
Exactly what I
That's
was thinking.
exactly what we
Yeah,
would like to
we're on
see.
the same page. Okay, great.
And next month, I will, again, be coming back for phase 2 of this, which focuses on student stations, but I always give an update on the cost, because 30 days later, we paid a few bills and revenue's a little bit different, so that might be the appropriate time to bring you back that list and ask, what does the board want to do, so. Okay,
Ms. Thor, I saw Mr. Phillips in the back. If it would please the board, I am curious to know what his thoughts are on potentially if we should add priority to upgrading or doing things to some of our athletic facilities differently than the way we have. And I mean, if I'm not putting him on the spot for that, I understand that it's 9 through 12 and it's not all of our students. I get that. But in some of our communities, we'll say North Marion or Dunellen or wherever, those students going to Dunellen Elementary are still going to those games at Dunellen High School, and they're aspiring to go there. They want to be proud of their community. Same thing with North Marion, or you just name it. And so I want us to ensure that we're not putting that off. I think that that's an important part of the culture of these schools and where we're trying to move this district forward.
Yeah, and I would like, if I can share, as Jody comes up, if that's the wish, is we met, a couple of weeks ago. And when I say we, it was Mr. Vianello, myself, Jody, and Miss Boston Ellis, to look at a recommendation. So Jody had spent a lot of time looking at schools and what their athletic needs are. And so we met. From that meeting, I turned around and met with technical services, custodial services, and facilities to say, let's look at these individually and what's the last time we've done something with this facility, what is the need and what is the want. Meanwhile, Jody is prioritizing the list so we can come back together and start putting some dollar figures with that list to include it, so.
I think, well said.
Did you just say everything you were going to say?
I was
Sorry,
actually
Jody.
just going to ask her if she would say that.
So the conversation is to be continued then?
Yes, it's in process, so we are looking at that list. Jody will will prioritize the list based on what he sees, and then we're also looking at what have we done, is this a want or is this a need, what's the dollar amount, and then we're gonna have to come back together and say, is it funded or unfunded, and if we fund it, then what's coming off that shorter list?
Yes.
Or if we, yes, or if there are alternative funding sources that we could explore.
Yes, absolutely.
And reprioritizing. That's what's so great about having these in-depth work sessions, because more often than not, we find out that there has been work going on behind the scenes, and then it's just clarifying. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I have a quick question though. While you're looking at this, are you just focused on like football and baseball and basketball, or how does that look?
We're looking at it from a comprehensive perspective. I will tell you, I think from a general sense, and I shared this with them, and if you're asking me, or the superintendent, or anyone was, a community member was to ask me, I think that we do have to begin at the high school level with priority, because day to day, functionally, that is where it starts. But in secondary, I mean, middle schools are certainly a part of it. But I think we have to functionally start with high schools and work from there.
Yeah, I was just curious about the sports because
It has
I
nothing.
think we should build an ice rink. Personally, I like hockey, right?
Okay.
So I'm not a fan of the others. So I'm like, since we're just throwing it out there,
I got you. I got
right,
you.
right?
I got
You
you.
know, the
got
Lightning may sponsor.
The Lightning, I think they are in
Have hockey
Tampa.
teams in the state of Florida? I mean, do we have-
Yes, we do.
Are you kidding?
We actually-
I mean, in high schools,
Did
I
she
mean,
just
I'm
ask that?
I'm saying in high schools, I'm saying in
Yes.
high schools, we do
There
have
are.
ice hockey teams?
in
Interesting.
like in the Brandon, Tampa,
Where they
Orlando
have professional
areas,
teams and the
Yeah.
access to rinks?
and even
Oh, yeah,
some
my high school had a
That
hockey team.
that this is it, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent now. Are the rinks of where those high schools participate, are they they're county or city funded?
They're club based.
Okay, that's what I was guessing.
Yeah, through like
Thank you.
Solar Bears in Orlando.
Absolutely, where there's already a county or city funded rink.
Right.
Sure.
Still though. It's all about exposure.
Intergovernmental meeting. Add it to the list.
Yes.
I'll drive the Zamboni.
Thank you, Jody. All right. Is that it for today?
Yeah, unless there's any particular thoughts, a lot been talked about, but obviously, if we talk more next month, perhaps that's when we might get any particular thoughts on projects. Otherwise, we'll bring you back the updated list. That's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for all your hard work and time.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to our annual equity report with Ms. Dwana Gary and Mr. Ben Whitehouse.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, school board members, Superintendent Dr. Gullett, and Mrs. Presbitino. Thanks for having us today. We will be providing an overview of the annual educational equity update. And as you know, that update is required. The Department of Education requests that each school district submit an annual equity update to monitor the school district's compliance with federal laws and regulations governing equity in education. So the equity plan is federal and state mandated. It provides provisions to protect students and employees from discrimination, and Title IX statute and school board policy support that. So this year's equity plan is made up of 7 areas. The first section addresses procedural requirements, which it contains the non-discrimination notices that go out, and those go out annually. The plan also addresses any incomplete or pending items from the previous school year. And the 3 areas that have the most data and the most information, which is student participation in advanced courses, gender equity in athletics, and employment equity. It also has a section in there for single-sex schools and classes, which don't apply to Marion County. And the last section in the plan is pregnant and parenting students, and that just ensures that our pregnant and parenting students have the same educational opportunities as any other student in Marion County. So today we're going to be giving an overview and highlighting the 3 areas that have the most information. So we'll start with student participation in advanced courses. So for that area, progress, we have to show evidence that progress is being made. towards eliminating gaps and increasing the participation of our Black and our Hispanic students, as well as our male students and our English language learners. This data is reported over a 5-year period, and it involves the advanced placement, IB and ACE, dual enrollment, and other honors courses for grades 9 through 12. So how did we do? Okay. Well, for our advanced placement, IB and ACE courses, there were increases in enrollment for our Black students as well as our Hispanic students. The gap, however, between our white students and our Black and Hispanic students did widen over a 5-year period. And that's for the AP, IB, and ACE courses. For our male students, our Black and Hispanic male students showed an increase in enrollment. However, the enrollment gap between our white students and our Black students increased. Our Hispanic male students, we saw a gap decrease between the white male students and the Hispanic male students. So that's a positive note as well. And then our dual enrollment courses. For our Black students and our Hispanic students enrolled in dual courses, we saw an increase in enrollment. So that is good as well. We did see a widening of the gap between our white students enrolled in a dual enrollment and our Black and Hispanic students. For our male students enrolled in dual courses, we saw that Black males stayed at the same percentage point from 5 years ago, and our Hispanic male students decreased 1%. And also the gap did widen between the groups. For all level 3 courses, and that's including honors courses, we saw an increase in participation for both our Black and Hispanic students. The enrollment gap, we saw that it decreased between our white students and our Black students. However, the enrollment gap between our white students and our Hispanic students remained at the same percentage point. For our male students enrolled in all level 3 courses, we saw an increase in in our Black male and our Hispanic male student participation. We saw that the enrollment gap for Black males decreased, and it decreased as well for our Hispanic males. Okay, now Mr. Whitehouse is going to share with you some of the action steps that we're doing to improve.
Good afternoon, board members. So we're certainly pleased to see that we have increased enrollment in our advanced courses across the board, but we know that we have a lot more work to do in terms of closing those gaps. Even though we're increasing all the groups, we're still not increasing those gap rates to make sure that we're able to provide more of our minority students access to those courses. So we're going to share a little bit about what steps we've taken in the past and certainly what steps we're going to take going forward to make sure that we can continue that push forward. From my perspective, obviously, we want to make sure that we are pushing towards 100% of our students not only graduating on time, but having that opportunity to accelerate while they're in high school before they leave us. So we're going to continue to build those pathways forward. So some of the steps we've taken, one, obviously we make sure that we share this data on an annual basis with our secondary principals. It's important for them to not only know that we've got to increase the acceleration of our students, but really paying attention to our subgroup data and where our students are and how we can build those support structures in place to make sure that every student has an opportunity for success in our schools. We take time to share best practices, which I think is important because some of our schools, when you look at acceleration data across our 7 high schools, some certainly have much higher acceleration scores than others, and being able to talk through how we make that happen and where we can benefit from each other's shared knowledge. We continue to look at enrollment policies. You'll notice that the smallest increase we saw is dual enrollment, obviously because dual enrollment has more challenging enrollment expectations as they're set in conjunction with the College of Central Florida and other colleges that we partner with. And so they have high GPA and testing requirements to enter into dual enrollment, whereas AP, IB, and ACE programs, we set our own enrollment criteria. And so working with schools to make sure that we have fair and equitable enrollment options for those students, and not simply waiting on students to self-select advanced courses, but how do we work with students individually to encourage and provide support so that they can be able to benefit from those programs with the right supports in place. Increasing the access is something we've been focused on for the last several years. We have expanded our Cambridge program, our IB and AP program offerings at our schools, and making sure that we have a variety of those options at each of our high schools so that our students have multiple pathways to be able to accelerate within advanced coursework, regardless of what school they're attending. We also are working to increase our middle school level support because we know that students being able to succeed in accelerated coursework doesn't start in high school. We really have to make sure that we've got the structures in place at an early age and that we're working to close those literacy gaps for our students and those mathematics gaps to make sure that those students are prepared when they get to high school. And so looking at ways that we can build in more advanced level coursework at the middle school level. We currently have pre-IB programs at Howard. We have pre-Cambridge programs at North Marion and Bellevue. And we are working now to introduce and build on pre-AP courses at Liberty Middle School and possibly expand beyond there, so that we've got more opportunities early on for students and can build those access pathways for them. Also, we've done a lot of work the last several years with AVID, which has been a great support structure, especially at the middle school level, to encourage more students who don't naturally select to do those advanced courseworks, to encourage them to accelerate and build the supports in place. And so with the AVID program, students have to take at least one advanced course in something that they're more competent with. And then through the AVID elective, we build in the study skills, the tutorial help, and the after-school tutoring as well that helps them be successful and meet the greater demands of those accelerated courses. And they find success and are much more willing going forward to take more and more accelerated courses once they realize that they are successful. Other things we will continue in the future, certainly we want to make sure that we break down any barriers for advanced coursework, so we do pay the cost of tuition and books for dual enrollment. For any of our students that are taking it, it's certainly a much less of a cost at Westport where we provide our own instructors, but we also pay for those who attend at CF as well. And so we will continue to do that. And then also using the AP potential data, which is something that we have access to for all of our students at all of our schools because we take the PSAT in 10th grade and we get AP potential data regardless whether you're at an IB school. That data is still useful because it helps us to really identify where the strengths are of the students based on their skill sets within English or within math. To find what courses they could be successful in, and the guidance counselors can work with the students and other school support to make sure that we're able to get those students in those courses. Sometimes they don't realize that they can be successful, but when they see the results and say, you know what, you really do have some great strength here, and we can build on that. Let's try moving into an honors class this year, and we'll put the support in place and then continue to advance that way. So we are starting to use more of the AP potential data, and actually last year we started giving the PSAT in 8th grade at Liberty Middle School, and we'll continue to expand beyond that because again that gives us more data that's useful to our students at a younger age so that we can help build in those pathways for them much earlier to be successful. And then our last step that we're working towards with ESSER funds is the hiring of a coordinator for multicultural education. We certainly know that we have some English language learner students who have great potential to be successful, but our teachers aren't always comfortable with what it takes to help support those students in their classroom, and so we want to make sure that we are expanding our teachers' skill sets so that our students, that our English language learners can have greater access to those courses as well.
Okay, so the next section of the equity report highlights gender equity in athletics, Title IX, and this requires that school districts provide opportunities for equal participation in both female and male sports. This area in which all of our high schools are working towards, and this is Jody's favorite area. You're going to hear from him shortly. We want to make sure that our male and female sports have equitable access to equipment, supplies, scheduling, travel, coaching, facilities, and I know that's something that you guys were just talking about, so it's on Jody's radar as well. Training, promotion, support services, and funding. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Phillips so that he can explain our past and future corrective action plans.
Thank you, Ms. Gary. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for allowing us to be here and speak about this. First, let me say, as a superintendent, knows and we discussed, I want you all to be confident that we do offer everything possible, basically, and you need to be confident in knowing that. Of course, we don't always get the participation level that we want, but you are offering students those opportunities. So that is a little confusing at times about compliance, and when they say offering, well, we are offering them. We can't force the students to come participate, but unfortunately, they only count the ones that show up, not just us and what we are offering. So it does get skewed a little bit, and so we fall short in the sense of female students when you compare the percentages school to school, and the level of female enrollment and the level of female participation, our percentages do fall short. So therefore, we are considered in that area non-compliant, but it is in no way that we aren't offering those opportunities. It's simply that the students are just choosing not to be a part of it. We provide you provide the supplements, we provide the coaches are there if the students want to participate, and so I just want to point that out. We do try to continue, of course, throughout the year, monitor data. Our coaches go inside the cafeterias and throughout the hallways, of course, recruiting, encouraging students. And some are successful at it, others have a difficult time, but they are doing it on a regular basis. I think a building block for us over the last few years has been the middle school program and exposing more of those students to, at least we have those 4 programs, and it does expose students to some of the things that they can move on. And it's important with the individual sports at middle school level, like a cross country and a track and field, where they don't have to perform at a certain level. Participation is the important part, and so they get a good feel for that, and we hope that it carries through. And of course, expanding JV or sub-varsity opportunities, because frankly, that's where we fall short most of the time in our schools, in our secondary schools, is at the sub-varsity level and finding that female participation. So our folks are doing that on a daily basis, and if you want to just, okay, thank you. And you'll see here, last year, of course, we did not add anything. COVID brought on a whole new meaning to our world, and therefore there wasn't that opportunity to really add anything at any of our schools from that standpoint. If anything, we saw a little decrease in participation just because of what was going on at the time, during those times. So we will continue to press forward and add what we can and encourage students and make the opportunities available, and hopefully at some point someday we can sit here in front of you and say that we have become compliant in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. So the last section, the employment equity section, requires that each district implement strategies to overcome discrimination and prior discrimination in the school district. So the overall premise here for employment equity is that our employee population should represent the student population. So how did we do? Well, for our Black district level administrators and our Black school guidance counselors, we have employees that represent our Black student population. So we're in compliance here. Where do we need to improve? These are the areas that are underrepresented compared to our student population. Our Black school administrators, which include our principals and assistant principals, our Black teachers, our Hispanics in all positions, others in all positions, as well as males in all positions. So what are we doing to improve? Well, as you guys know, the district has hired a director of talent development, and they're going to focus on retention efforts and develop a comprehensive recruitment program. So that is exciting. We're going to continue to collaborate with TPG, Cultural Exchange Program. We're going to continue Aspiring Administrator Academy and expand teacher pathways. And that's basically, you know, for example, paraprofessionals moving up to a teacher position, you know, giving that support for that group as they climb up the career ladder. So that's exciting as well. We're going to continue participating in the Diversity and Education Job Fair. Okay, any questions?
Yes.
I have one question about the numbers for sports and the enrollment. Is it possible for us to see the numbers, not right now, of how many students are in the high school and then how many are playing each sport? So I'm curious what those numbers look like. And I'm also curious to know, like, if it's the same student playing multiple sports. Yeah, I'm really curious about those numbers and how that looks.
I've got some copies. I'll get Elena.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't have to be right now.
Okay.
Because I know it was like last minute. I'm just thinking.
Email them to us.
Yeah, it could be emailed and whenever you get that data.
I'll give you a rough, just off the top, and because I am somewhat familiar with it in that sense. When we do not count repeat athletes from going back to 1920, hard data we looked at because of participation fees, and we just recently did that just a couple months ago. We were in the 27 to 2,800 student range, single student, no repeating. Then when you add multi-sport athletes to the equation, I think our numbers came to between 3,500 and 3,600.
And then I would like to see a breakdown of each, what the schools
Yes.
look like.
Yes,
Yeah.
on the documentation, I will be able to
Okay,
give
thank
that.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we drill down a little bit deeper? I'd like to see it broke down even by race, ethnicity, to see
I'll write that down.
Okay.
on that as well. And then I also had another question on the part where we were talking about student participation in advanced courses. Has the district set any specific type of goals that we want to? I saw the methods, I saw the strategies, but what goals have we set to close those gaps? If we have a 3%, or are we trying to increase every year by what percentage point? Because there should be some, I mean, what I'm looking at is a 5-year span or something. I think that's what we were looking at, right? And some of them are very minimal growth, very, very minimal, but the gaps are not minimal, they're increasing. So what specific type goals have we set?
May I, Madam Chair? Thank you. That's an excellent question, Board Member Cummings. And actually, that's really what you're going to see in the strategic plan. As we know, we've worked on those overarching goals. That is one of the key areas that we have highlighted as a strategy, and you will see specific numbers associated with that over the course of this 5 years. So the accountability we'll be providing updates as far as where we go and how we're meeting those marks. But again, another reason why, in terms of personnel, you see these additional personnel members added to our staffing plan to address them, because we know we have gaps, but we need to put some action and some numbers to addressing those areas.
And then my other question would come from employment equity. It said that we were in compliance as far as with black district level administrators. I guess it's 2-point, and black school guidance counselor 2-part question. When does a person consider to be at the district level as an administrator? At what point, when they become like a program specialist or something?
So they would be a supervisor or a coordinator, a director, yeah.
Not school-based.
Not school-based.
District.
Right.
Right, correct.
District. And then, what about Hispanics? I mean, is this just, I'm just saying it says black district level administration, black school guidance counselors.
Hispanics
Right.
was all of them.
Hispanics for all positions. everywhere.
So we're not in compliance anywhere with the Hispanics.
No, we're working towards compliance.
So my questions, the very first question I wrote down is, so what are our contributing factors to where we've gotten and where we're going? But what I would like to see in the future, as this presentation comes forth to us, the very first slide I would like to see is, what is the makeup of our district? What is our student makeup? I mean, when we're seeing that 25% of our black students are doing this, or 3% of them are doing that, well, of the makeup of the whole district, because when we get to this employment equity slide and we see that we have achieved this, we have this right number of black district level administrators, but what is the percentage we're actually looking to get to? And the only way we know that is actually what our makeup of our students are. And I'm sure it's somewhere on the website that I could probably try to find really quickly, but I wasn't able to find it. So that's something I would like to see in the future, because I think that will help us even quickly come up with a percentage of, okay, well, that means we need this percentage of this and this percentage of that. And obviously we know that we need to increase our Hispanic and male positions and black school administrators and black, we know all of those that we're going to have to increase. And again, going back to the original question, what are our contributing factors? The other thing that I wanted to point to, and I'm glad that Reverend Cummings brought up about athletics, because I want to also know what the makeup is. I'm curious to know, and this may not be an equity question, but based on all of this being combined into one conversation, are our athletes, if the percentage is high of certain demographics that we're discussing here from an equitable standpoint, not participating in rigorous coursework? That could also be a question here that's all, since we're tying, I mean, these are two completely separate issues, but we're tying it all into one presentation. So I'm curious about that. If our athletes are not participating in rigorous coursework, and I don't know what that answer is. But the only other question that I had was kind of going back to the original question about the makeup of the district. When I hear that we are increasing middle school, as Mr. Whitehouse was talking about, that with North Marion Middle School and Bellevue Middle School having their pre-ACE programs that we already have well established, the pre-IB program at Howard, and we're adding a pre-AP at Liberty, my question is, are we going to the schools with the demographics of the students that we're needing to reach? So I'm thinking of like Horizon, for example, or Dunellen, or Fort King. I know Fort King had an AVID program and they don't any longer. So are we actually pinpointing and targeting those additional feeder schools to our high schools that actually have the demographics that we're needing to move the needle on? So maybe the answer is yes, but that's what I was curious. I mean, obviously we know why some of these are chosen, because North Marion High School has the ACE program, and Bellevue High School has the ACE program, and Howard is the automatic feeder to Vanguard. But some of the Horizon feeds into Westport, and so if they don't have those programs, how are we enhancing our middle school programs at the non-feeders to these that I think would help us, frankly, in our changes?
So I can certainly speak to the steps we're taking. So the goal is eventually to expand beyond with the pre-AP program. Horizon and Dunellen Middle are certainly very easy targets for us because they both feed into Dunellen High and Westport High, which have strong AP programs there. So eventually the goal is going to be to expand them. Liberty was chosen because they have the strongest AVID program, so they have a structure already built in place to support students taking advanced programs. Horizon is just starting AVID this school year, and so we're hopeful to continue to build those supports for the school to lay the groundwork so that we can then begin expanding. But then we also, of course, have to look at the cost factor with it, because at the high school level, our advanced level courses generate weighted FTE when students pass those exams that help us with funding those programs. At the middle school level, we have to be a little bit more creative in how we find those dollars.
Just making sure that we are targeting the schools that have the largest demographic of those that we're trying to reach. Mm-hmm. That's going to help. If we're targeting middle schools to help us get there at the high school level, we have to look at demographics in order to make that number change.
And I can speak to the employment equity data, if you want to pass that around. So the equity plan is 163 pages. So we tried to condense it for you guys in the quick PowerPoint. But if you look at the equity report, you'll see the data for the student demographics and the breakdown for each area of our employment population that the Department of Education requests for us to submit data. And they request, they have these templates that we fill out, and this is one of them. So that's all in the equity report itself.
So, Ms. Gary, I know a few years ago, there was a deseg order in place for Marion County, and we had to become compliant with that. With some of this stuff, are we still in compliance? Are we headed towards not being compliant?
Well, what the Department of Education requires is that we submit an action plan, a corrective action plan for areas that were non-compliant. And so when we do that, then we address, those areas, and it puts us in compliance for turning in our annual equity plan. As far as that order, maybe Attorney Powers can speak to that.
I'm not prepared to speak to that at this time. The desegregation order is over. I mean, it's been closed for a number of years.
Correct.
There's no controlling factor that I'm aware of, nor any threat that it could come back. But I'm not prepared to speak to it at this time.
And these are last year's numbers, yes. I'm sorry, I was doing some math. I'm counting principals. I know we've had a couple of changes. These are.
Right, so
last year's
these
numbers.
are, exactly, so from October.
Right. Some changes that we've had in.
Exactly, and those changes, I've requested numbers for those changes, so
Okay.
they're still in, progress as they have to be approved and go through that process.
Right.
So they're not included. So we will see an increase.
Good. Anything else, Board?
I have one, maybe you could help me. When I'm looking at this, so I see that, if we look at the student demographics for Black students, it shows 19%. District level administrators, it shows 24%. But when I looked at this, it says we're underrepresented. So how do we decide what is represented and not? They don't look at the demographics of our county and our students?
Yes, they do. So we're represented for district level administrators. They represent our student population.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good in the
But
green.
This, it says we're underrepresented.
No, it starts with
No,
principals.
slide 20, with the big green check mark, that's the,
We're okay with
we're
district.
good with
level,
district
but
level, we're good with
Right.
school-based.
Like, yeah, principals,
So okay, because I was looking at this and I just saw administrators, and then I saw this and I was like, oh, when it
Yeah,
wasn't
for
matching.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
why it's
you.
green, I think. Like,
So the green
is
areas.
we're good, right?
Right, exactly.
Green is go. Okay.
Yeah.
So that should be red.
So, okay.
The visual in me.
And I will be interested with some new appointments and things how this has already changed for 2021, 2022. I think that, I don't know when we can get that update, if we have to wait until next summer to hear from you, but I do think with some employment recommendations and approvals that we've already made for this upcoming school year, we've already changed some of the demographics.
We,
Board Member Campbell, I think you will see that. I mean, I don't know whether the numbers will shape out with the percentages, but we could provide, if the board would like, we could certainly provide even perhaps a mid-year update of that number.
That'd be nice.
Right, so you don't have to wait till the end?
Right. And I mean, it might be able to include the fall sports, and then we can, talk through what fall looked like and if we're adding the whole report again. But definitely from these things that we're wanting to change. I mean, if we're wanting to change them, we probably seeing it more than once a year would be helpful.
I'm sorry, were you about to say something?
Go ahead.
I know prior to you getting here, Dr. Gullett, we were, this is something that I had addressed Mr. Whitehouse and Mr. Fionello and I think some others. We had like an administrators type cadre that we were talking about to try to move the needle on some of his minority type administrators and stuff like that. Are we still doing anything with that? Has it gone by the wayside or what? What's going on with that?
So,
Because I knew we had kind of identified some males, minority males and stuff like that.
yes, sir. We do have a few of those gentlemen that were in that group that have moved up, which is exciting. A lot of that has been enveloped within our entire administrative, aspiring administrator cadre that's housed within our professional leadership and learning department. So I don't believe they have anything last year. I'm not sure if they're planning anything for this year that targets specifically at males, but they do work with aspiring administrators across the board.
And Dr. Gill, I'm not even sure if you know about this. I may just be talking off the top of my head, but prior to you getting here, that was one of the things that I was just really concerned about, that there weren't these minority males in front of minority males. But I truly believe you'll aspire to those things that you see, those people that you see. And because there was a lack of that in front of these young men, that we needed to do something. So, and they did start something. I was just wondering where we were at with that.
Yes, so if I may, Board Member Cummings, I couldn't agree more. And we've had very frank conversations about that and concerted effort to address hiring minorities, of course, and students that can see themselves in those that they see in leadership roles, as well as talent development. That'll also be a key piece. And without calling out a new principal, I've already spoken to one of our new principals about some opportunities that she has even as a principal to help us connect and do some hiring, recruiting, and supporting. So we have a multifaceted effort in place already that we'll be working through this year to address that and get those who have expertise and knowledge to help us with that. Right. Yes, absolutely.
Because one of the things that I heard, and I was just coming onto the board, is that, and I'm seeing some numbers here that I didn't even know existed, when it came to asking for Hispanic males, the thing that I got was, it's a unicorn. That's a unicorn. I was like, got to be. I can't believe that they don't exist, and I know that they do. So I'm encouraged to see that there are some on this sheet, Ms. Gary, in some of those areas, but I'm still concerned because I see a lot of white on the paper. And I'm glad you didn't make it red, because the paper would be bleeding right now.
We try to focus on the positive, right?
Yeah.
But you will see that, it's males across the board
Correct.
that
Correct.
we are in need of.
Correct.
So, yeah, we're working towards that.
I'm sorry, one more as well. If I may, Board Member Cummings, this is a conversation I've actually had with the CEP when you speak about Hispanic American population that met with the Hispanic Business Council in our community. And this is an area that I haven't heard a lot of conversation about a lot last year, but we're having those conversations. This is a growing population in our community, student growing the base. That's why we're adding a multicultural person. We have to begin to better meet the needs of all of our students, and that is one area that is a priority. Just want to mention that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gullett. Again, it circles right back around to communication and building the relationships so you can build a network to meet the needs of each and every kid. And just slipping back to slide 17, and it's a quick question, maybe even more of a comment about promoting sports starting in middle school. I would share possibly that elementary school would be the place to start for that, because by the time kids get to middle school, then they've got puberty and all of those role things going on that may or may not make a young girl want to play sports necessarily, but if they're introduced to it very young, then it just becomes part of what you do. And I was just kind of growing up myself, in the days where you walked to school and then walked home for lunch and then came back. We played football, we played grass tackle. I couldn't understand when I got to junior high why I couldn't try out for the football team. But in those days, that just wasn't going to happen.
Nah, not at that age.
But to this day, I love football, and I think that's been, and just being active in general, and I think that has stood me in good stead. And I'll just give another shameless plug then for having covered areas for PE in elementary schools, because we have to get the kids out, we have to get them exposed to these things, and it's in their best interest. So that's my shameless plug.
And I was about to ask something too with the sports. And Jody, you probably remember this because we're in the same grade. I remember, like, when I was at Dr. N.H. Jones, we had a track team, we had a gymnastic team, we had a basketball team, and we played other schools in the county, at least once, or it came to like a county meet. Did those things just all go away?
No.
Well,
Are they still
At
doing
the
them?
elementary, at the elementary level, it's handled through PE.
Right, it was
doesn't
through
really
PE.
fall-
It was through PE, yeah.
Right, because I'm in secondary, so.
Right.
I
They
don't
have an
touch-
elementary athletic
they-
director?
I don't touch that world, but I do know that they still, and if Mr. Whitehouse wants to jump in, but we do still, because a lot of the high schools host some of the events that take place, like a track meet and such, so, they do some soccer,
Right, there was
kickball
soccer,
type
there
things.
was a
yes.
soccer, there was gymnastic, there was a basketball.
A lot of that
And
is
it-
county
and
now,
it-
though.
and
like-
it-
Yeah.
And it is not,
But it's not on the scale that it
No.
was, can't be.
No.
it is not what it was, no. It-
Having
Because-
elementary age children.
Right, because
no.
those, and I don't
It's
remember it
not
with my
what you're
kids in
envisioning.
elementary, because I don't remember my kids doing it in elementary school. But, and I didn't see them pick up that type of sport again until they got into middle school, and then it was only basketball.
Well, I also, please do keep in mind, we kind of have to transition back 2 years
Right.
to really think
Right.
about what it looked
Right,
like.
right.
Because last year,
There was
just wipe
nothing,
it
right.
off.
Right.
the-
Right.
Just,
Yeah, no, I'm going back, I'm going back.
I know, I'm not,
Like a lot
no,
of-
and I'm not saying that you aren't, I'm just,
Yeah.
we really,
Yeah.
there's been a long period of time since it looked somewhat
Yeah.
normal, middle school or elementary for that matter.
So then we need to have that emphasis again, I guess, in elementary school to be that feeder pattern to the middle school to get to high school. And I know, I do know at secondary, very few freshman teams, correct?
Very. Very.
Because the middle school Mr. Phillips and I had this conversation recently, having middle schoolers and soon to, anyway, and obviously during the most recent year, we've not had the typical year, but middle school sports, we have some missing, I believe that they have some opportunity for some strengthening at that level. And frankly, if we're having a global community conversation, we need someone to pick up the mantle for youth basketball. Frankly, if you look at our community athletic programs as a whole, you have a thriving MCYFL, you have a thriving Big Sun Soccer, you have thriving Rotary, Wrigley baseball, et cetera, and no one's picking up youth basketball. So I mean that's just one of the major sports that we tend to use for athletic gate fees that help fund all the girls golf teams and things like that once you get to the high school level. But middle school athletics have not been incredibly strong, at least from what I'm familiar with, from what I grew up with. Again, I didn't grow up here, but from what I grew up with, and to your point, elementary school has not been strong either. But I have been out at Dr. N.H. Jones walking with the PE techs and the PE teachers and seeing one doing golf lessons, one doing tennis over here. I mean, they spread it out and they introduce those kids to those sports, but then how to translate that into something competitive isn't really happening, from what I gather. And this whole equity thing, it starts there. It does.
Well, we do have a lot of community programs too. I think of, cheer and dance and soccer and all of those things. So anyway, it's food for thought. We do know that, especially these days, kids at a very young age focus on what is going to be their sport of the future. And, if they have a passion for something and it's something that is popular, like I was noticing beach volleyball, that's become quite a thing, and that was not a thing before. So, always room to be innovative and do whatever we can to get the kids moving. It's a plus.
But I agree. I agree. And then I look at certain sports, not to pick on one, but I'm going to pick on it. I look at a sport like lacrosse. It shows up at high school, but where's the feeder to it? How does a kid get interested in lacrosse at ninth grade when they didn't see it at 7th and 8th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So, I look at the totality of the thing,
Right.
how you get into
And that
it.
is the equity thing too, because, if parents are available and can do it and whatever, they'll do club sports, and travel baseball and, all of that, but,
Spending the money on it.
yeah, they're spending the money. But for kids that, again, need that window, that's what it takes. So, yep, always a lot to it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for everything. All right, is there anything else from the board? Okay. Is there any public comment? All right, seeing none, we are going to begin to wrap it up. And we will move on to board comments and concerns. Dr. Gullett, we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll be very brief, but I have a celebration. Just came up today while we were here. We have, the district has received a donation of 500 pairs of shoes for our students and 1,000 pairs of socks from Souls for Souls.
Souls for Souls.
Yes, and so that's really going to help our students of great need getting ready for back to school. So wanted to say thank you and celebrate that.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, Vice Chair King.
Yeah, it's been a long day.
Always is.
I really don't have too much to say other than thank you for everyone that made summer school and extended learning available. Thank you, Mags. Welcome to our county. And then also Miss Teresa Bostonellis. I started to say TBE, but I won't. Congratulations and thank you for your due diligence for you and your team for their awards. You always make us look very bright in that area. And that's about all I have for today. But I will say this, when I was thinking about the elementary PE teachers, they have tough jobs. I mean, teaching's one thing, but to be teaching athletics and them is a whole other, because when you have that many students on a field and getting them to organize or whatever, I mean, it takes skill and technique, and I'm grateful for them too. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair King. Board Member Cummings.
I'm glad to be back. It seems like we were gone for a while, but glad to be back. Welcome, Miss Irving. What did we say it was? MTI? Welcome, MTI. She's going to have 20.
Really gonna confuse the public.
I know.
No,
They are.
and a person.
She's gonna have 20 names before she get out of here. But thank you. I'm glad to have you aboard, and we look forward to the things that you're going to bring to this district and moving us to the next level. And always, Ms. Boston Ellis, your team is awesome. I would match you against your team against any team in the nation as far as what we have here. So Marion County is blessed to have you guys here. And Dr. Gullett, we got a new year. We're going to be moving, pushing the needle and pushing, changing some of these stats. I know we just come off a challenging year, and we're still in some challenges, but I just believe that we're on the brink of something great for a breakthrough for our district in every area. And I'm just looking forward to see what's going to happen this year. So glad to see my fellow board members again. So that's it for me.
Okay, Board Member Campbell. Very
I
uplifting.
concur all of the praise and kudos and welcomes and all the things that have come before. So thank you, ladies. Welcome, and thank you, Ms. Boston Ellis, as well. And I completely concur with Reverend Cummings that there's just energy right now, and it feels like we're on the brink of greatness. And I think that we're 100% moving in the right direction. I'm going to say kudos also to our business community. Yesterday during the CEP breakfast in the Public Education Foundation, we now have all of our schools with at least one business partner, some with more than one. It's been a while since that has been the case. And so kudos to everyone who was involved in making sure that that came to fruition, because every time we signed a new business partner, and that doesn't, I had some individuals ask me recently, do I have to be a business or can individuals become a partner? Well, hey, if you want to give us $3,000, you are more than welcome to become a partner with a school as an individual. And so we welcome that, because every dollar that comes in, that's $2,500 back to each one of those schools that they can use, undesignated dollars that they can use for all of the things that are unfunded that they need. So we welcome more business and individual partners should they choose to do that. You can always contact the Public Education Foundation, and Megan Magamal, she'll be happy to sign you up at any given time. But I am grateful that we are all schools going to have a business partner this year. And the other things I had on my list actually were what you have here, because I wanted to mention about the FSBA district representative, as well as Ms. McCall had been serving as the legislative liaison, I guess, for this board. And I've had some contact with some of our state officials recently, and perhaps they've contacted me and you all as well, because we didn't have a designated person at this juncture. And I didn't know if that's the case, but regardless, I just wanted to see where we wanted to go with that conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We are on the same page. Attorney Powers.
Nothing from legal. I think we've covered it all either prior to today's meeting or during today's meeting, so.
And there has been a lot covered in the legal department in so many positive ways. Thank you for continuing to just make that pipeline flow.
Thank you.
The work that you all are doing is amazing. Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Prespatino. Okay, thank you. All right, yes, I do have a few things, has to do with all the different committees that we need representation on. I'll go ahead and start with the Public Education Foundation. They're clearly wonderful partners of ours. They need someone to fill that role. It is once a month in the morning. And Board Member Cummings, I was thinking in terms of proximity to all the other things you have going on, if that might be a role that you would be willing to serve on. And if so, would you reach out to Megan Magamal?
No problem.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Also, this is from Leslie Nottingham from the Magnolia Art Exchange, and they also are in need of someone. They meet the first Thursday of the month at 4 o'clock. And what I shared with Ms. Nottingham was that this may likely be a role that each of us would take turns attending, like we're doing with the Department of Health updates. This wouldn't be via Zoom, but then that way we can share and that's something I'm not that familiar with, so I'm looking forward to learning more, and I don't know if the rest of you are super familiar with it, but if you're not, to me, that's an opportunity for each of us to get a little more familiar. And we don't know when our new board member is going to be appointed. I do know that the window to apply is still open. It will remain open until someone is appointed, and that's all I know right now.
Right.
Okay, so for now, the four of us need to fill the very large shoes of a fifth board member. Okay, so I will, first Thursday of the month, and I am not available the first Thursday of this month at 4 o'clock. So please check your calendars. Maybe you can do that now if there's someone that could step up for that. And you have handouts, so if it's something that you can cover, please reach out to the Magnolia Art Exchange, Ms. Nottingham.
We have a work session that day, August 5th.
I don't,
How did this happen? I mean, did Beth, like,
Okay.
I've never heard of this being a board responsibility.
that could be clarified, but my understanding is that she represented from the Marion County School Board, so,
Right, but she may have just been there. I don't.
and maybe
ever
because it was a
recall this.
passion.
And it could have been her passion, so
Good
let's
point.
clarify that, because I don't ever recall this being,
There's a work session on August 5th. I have not heard of the Magnolia Art Exchange.
Yeah,
as
me
one of the
either.
board committees. I'll be happy to print the committee sheet again.
Okay.
And provide that in everyone's mailboxes, but that is not one of the committees.
that
on
might
the
be
list.
something Beth can still serve on, actually, because
Right.
Possibly,
Right.
because, that
that
could be
seems to
really
be
good.
hers, but I don't recall this. I don't ever nominating, anyone being nominated.
Okay, it came out of
So
left field for me
Could
too,
have
but
just been
that's why I'm bringing it up.
confusion. It's probably confusion, so Beth really probably could still be that board member.
Okay.
Like, not a
And
school
she's
board
not on the
member,
board
but,
anymore, so I will reach out to her, and she could be our community
Yeah.
liaison for that if she's still willing to do it, or available. I'm sure she'd be willing if she's available. But if not, perhaps Joe Crowder would be willing to do that. Let me check into it a little bit more, so let's hold off on that right now. I'll reach out to former board member McCall and get some background. Okay, all right, and then the next one, yes, board member Campbell, the liaison, I did get more information about that. It is important for FSBA as far as the legislative liaison. They want someone in that role that is going to be on the board for 2 years. And we're in a unique position because there's no guarantee that the three of us will be on the board 2 years from now. So my question to you is, and you know, we all, this makes it pretty easy because we all know our local legislators. I feel like we all have good relationships. So if you would be willing to step into that role, then I was going to ask Vice Chair King, who has done it before, to be the alternate. And then that way we've got the base covered. And if you have questions that don't need to be asked in the direct sunshine, you guys can work together in terms of scheduling and that kind of thing.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, and I am going to need some clarification as to whether or not that's something that we have to vote on. FSBA said that it's something we may have to vote on, but it didn't say we do have to vote on.
I will have to look into that.
Okay, August 1st is when they would like to have someone, you know, in the role, but we've agreed as who's going to do it, so then the vote would be a formality. Yes.
The board chair can appoint chair members and board members to appoint to that role. It is one of your regular.
Right, yes, I did know that. Okay,
Just appoint, I think that's-
and we don't have to vote on it.
It's one of the regular school board meetings.
I
Okay,
think if you want input from the rest of the board, then you have that today, and you can have,
so we're
the
good.
equivalent of consensus. But
Right.
it's up to you.
Okay. So we are good there, and then the other one is the Board of Directors, and this caused some confusion at the FSBA summer meeting because we are part of an area that does not have majority of their members in FSBA. Only Marion County members are eligible to fill these positions, and it's seat number 22. And it's for the Board of Director and alternate. So, pardon? You can do that one? Okay, you sure?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you, and I'd be happy
They
to,
only meet once a month.
okay, and I'd be happy to be the alternate for that. Okay, I was gonna go ahead
You can
and,
be the director, I'll be the, it doesn't make a difference. I'm just jumping in where we need the help.
right.
Yeah.
And if it's, yes, if it captures your interest and you're willing to do that, then that would be wonderful, and, okay. All right, and if you change your mind, let me know, but we can tag team it because I'll be the alternate, how's that?
All right.
Okay, and I will give you all these with the names on them unless you're 100% clear. Okay, and I think we did Public Education Foundation. I'm going to check on Magnolia Art Exchange. We've got the 2 FSBAs. I think that might be it. For right.
That is not one of them on the list. I can review the list if you like.
Which one is not?
The Magnolia Art Exchange is not on your school board.
Okay, all right, I'll speak with former board member McCall then. All right, and then the last thing I had on my mind, because I'll be part of the meeting of the ICROC committee coming up on July 28th, and I keep thinking that it would be on next August's ballot, but it won't be because that law changed and it has to be a year from November, so we're not in as much of a time crunch as I keep telling myself we are, which is reassuring.
But when does it sunset then?
Pardon?
Of 22,
Yeah,
July, or 23.
but it starts in November, right?
You're talking about when does it sunset?
Yeah,
It's 23.
okay, 23. Yeah, so it would be voted November 22, sunsets.
Yes.
Same ballot that
So it will-
potentially these 3 seats
So it will
are
be
on.
it will be on next August ballot.
No.
Next August is the primary.
Next November's
It used to
ballot,
be the
yeah.
general election.
You're right. General election,
Change
okay.
that.
I got you.
Right. And something that's been on my mind a lot, we really do, we have benefited, kids have benefited greatly from this funding referendum. And it was renewed with over 70% or close to 70%. And, we would like to see that margin again. I think it's important for the community to understand, you know, when you read in the paper, oh, 18 million here, you know, 56 million there, you know, why would we even be coming back to the voters to ask for this money? And as a citizen, I want an answer to that question. And then as I think about it, you know, the ESSER funds are encumbered. You know, we wouldn't have been able to have the summer recovery programs that we had this summer if it weren't for ESSER funds. And I'm a little bit worried about the perspective of the public. You know, when you hear $56 million, that sounds like a lot of money, and why would we be asking for more? Well, first of all, we haven't gotten that money. Second of all, we're not sure when we're going to get that money. Second, we're not sure how much is going to be held back for whatever. So I think it's really important to be mindful of the ballot language and what is it that the community, now that we have their attention and they are becoming much more trusting and supportive. I see that, I feel it, I hear it, I get the outreach. There is something I think that's missing that we've always needed, and that we just haven't faced, and that is Marion County is the size of Rhode Island, and in terms of access, we have great career and technical education programs now, thanks to that expansion and the 3 E's. We have now so many vocational options, but if I live in Fort McCoy and my program of choice is down in Bellevue, that's an issue, and it always has been. So I'm not sure what the ballot language could be adjusted to look like, but I hear that in the community all the time. So it's something for us to toss around. Dr. Gull and I spoke about this the other day, but thinking in terms of just with the ballot language in front of me, you know, to include physical education, art, music, library, bus transportation to vocational career and technical education choice programs. That's a mouthful. So hopefully a better messenger than me can, you know, condense that. But I think it's something we need to think about. I feel like the community will be very supportive of that, and it will be something new that we haven't had the money to support before. I mean, remember how happy we were to get those compression funds, you know? So anyway, I'm just sharing that right now, seeing what y'all think. Messaging is going to be key. It always is.
And I completely agree. Putting these programs where students are is a passion, actually, of mine. I also would like to see it enhanced at our middle school levels. We don't have middle school shop class that leads to construction programs. We don't have some of those, you know, things that some of us grew up with in middle school. I mean, I'm not going to throw in necessarily like a home economics life skills class, but would love to see that enhanced.
That.
They
love that.
They do, and we don't have them. We don't have them. So if there was a way, I think our community would embrace that 100%. If we could figure out how to create that in our middle schools and even
pathways.
Absolutely. Life skills.
And kids learn stuff very young these days. They are exposed to all kinds of things. So can we expose them, please, to things that are going to help them in life?
I agree. I think the more exposure, the more opportunities these kids have, the better choices they'll make. And when I see that there isn't home ec classes, I see that there isn't shop classes, I wonder who my son's going to marry when he gets a little bit older. Is he going to have a good cook or not? I teach him how to cook. So that was chauvinistic, y'all. I know it.
Or if she's going to be able to nail that thing on the wall, or if she's going to be able to measure and level.
Only male on the board. That's what that is.
Well, you're getting out. She's going to be Rosie the Riveter.
He is going to be Rosie the Riveter. If I have anything to do with it.
But those things are needed, and I just always think as a kid, we were exposed to everything in middle school: Spanish, shop, music, all those things. We had that exposure, and we chose different pathways based on that exposure. So it needs to. We got to figure out how to do it.
We had 9 weeks in every single.
Yes,
we did.
Yes.
Wheel.
Yeah, we made a wheel.
6 weeks for
It
me.
was 6.
We did 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6
Well, people are smarter in Tennessee. They pick it up.
We also had junior high, which I'm also in favor of, but that's different.
But those things need to come back, and we need to figure out how to do it. I think our language needs to be very specific. And we definitely need some buy-in from our business community and the CEP as well, because I think that's what helped us move the needle last time very easily and get that pushed through, so.
Right, and I did speak to TBE about it, because when I think of transportation, I wasn't sure if that was, I guess they operate, because you operate a bus. Yeah, so it is operation, so it could fall under there, and Dr. Gullah, we've had a great time talking about this. Equestrian, all that stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Needed programs in our community.
Yeah,
So every school get a horse?
let's ride. Make it a PE class.
Got a few up at North Marion.
They do rodeo in Wyoming. I don't know how they get away with that in risk management. Lori Lively's probably going, no. Let's ride a bull.
Rodeo.
Rodeo and hockey.
Oh,
Ice hockey.
Hockey. Anyway, I think that we really, obviously there appears to be a lot of enthusiasm for this. It's so important kids have one shot, pre-K through 12, to get all the exposure they can possibly get, to get on a life path that will help them be successful and great citizens. So the messaging piece and how the statement in the ballot, I'm looking at Mr. Christians right now.
My ears are perking up.
Okay, all right. Yep, so we can follow up with that. But it sounds pretty exciting to me, that's for sure. All right, and everyone else too. So that's a lot, but I think that's it for me for today. It sure has been a pleasure being all back together. I've missed everyone, and getting the band back together is great, and welcome to welcome to all of our new employees, our returning employees. Our task now is to retain you, make sure that you are just 100% invested in Marion County Public Schools. We're certainly investing in you, and yep, we're on the cusp.
I have a request.
It's going to be our breakthrough year, like the Cleveland Browns.
I have a request that we don't have such long breaks between meetings again, because y'all just tried to make up for everything that we missed the last few weeks in one meeting.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed. I mean, I know we took like a break for the month of July, almost it felt like, but this
like
was
we
an
made it all
marathon.
up today.
We did.
So,
And I think we even did slip in a little meeting in July.
y'all did.
There's just a lot going on, and when you take on a lot and you're passionate about it, there's.
I'm just kidding.
We had June 30th.
I thought you wanted more breaks like during the meeting. I was like,
I know.
We made up for the time that we were away today. So
Agreed.
everybody's been thinking.
And working.
Right. And breaks are good. Breaks are important.
and
Yes. Got to relax and recharge.
Reset.
Got to reset. All right. Well, if there's nothing else for the good of the group, I think we are going to bring this marathon work session, which they always seem to be, to an enthusiastic close at 2:24 p.m. Thank you, everyone.